that? Alright, my name is Hosh. I work for Opscode out in Seattle. So how many of you have heard of Opscode? Yeah, so there's enough people. Opscode does a product called Chef that configures software. And what I'm going to show today is something that allows you to use Chef on your own development files. So how many of you actually have multiple projects on your laptop at any given time? A few of you, yeah. And how many of you have problems with conflicts, like dependency conflicts between different projects, because they overlap to each other? And how many of you use virtual machines to manage that? Right. Okay, then the next question is, how many of you manually install the operating system for each of the virtual machine or use snapshots? This is for you. But it's actually for everyone. Virtual machines allow you to run whole operating systems within a single server. And traditionally, they've been kind of finicky, kind of a pain to manage because you have to basically install the software all over again. However, with the configuration management software technology that we have, they're mature enough that you can let that handle it. Okay. So, as an example, I have here a basic Rails app. This is just generated. It's not really that big of a deal. There's really nothing in here, but just a Rails app. And I have a software called Kamino. Just a small script that will dump 2 files, or a couple files into your project. I've already generated it, but you can see that. The 2 important ones is this. The first is the Vagrant file, and there's supposed to be a Brookshelf file here. Yep, the Brookshelf file, right there. So when we use a virtual machine, we are actually using like VirtualBox here, like this thing. We're actually using it from the command line with something called Vagrant. So how many of you have used Vagrant or yeah, okay, plenty of people. Now, how many of you have used Brookshelf with Vagrant? That's where the fun thing comes in. What Brookshelf does is let you specify the cookbooks you want, just like a gem file. You can pull it down from GitHub, you can pull it down from the community site, and there are tons and tons and tons of community cookbooks out there now. You don't have to write your own anymore. You want Postgres cookbook, you can find it on the community site. You want Nginx, find it on the community site. So I put together a cookbook that combines together some of the elements for a system that can run Rails, Nginx, Postgres, Ruby. Pretty simple, huh? And once you have that set up, it's just bringing it up with Vagrant. I'm kind of cheating here because we don't have internet connection, so I just suspended it. But normally when you do a Vagrant up, if it has to create it from scratch, it'll download Ubuntu, and then it'll go ahead and download Ruby, it'll download your Postgres, it'll download Nginx, it'll configure all of that stuff up for you, and then you just SSH into it, and just run it. It's the shared file is already set up for you. So let's see, how do I do this? It's been a while. Yep. No. section. But but yeah, that's on the Linux box. That's on OS 10. So you can install that's anything you want with the button. And I encourage you guys to start looking into this, because as we have, when you put things into production, there's going to be cloud servers these days. And it doesn't always make sense to be developing on OS 10 and then trying to test things out on the cloud. And then furthermore, if you notice, the Vagrant file and the Berkshire file is versioned into the project. So that means that you can define the operating system dependencies with the project. And then when a new person comes in to work on a project, they just clone the project and do Vagrant up. Okay? So, any questions?
What about, so for deployment, do you use the same Berkshire stuff, or would you use your own recipes for, your own chef recipes for deployment?
You can. What we're doing now, and this is a relatively recent practice, is you have two different types of cookbooks, one called library cookbooks and one called application cookbooks. And library cookbooks would be generic cookbooks for Postgres, all that. And you have a specific library cookbook that has dependencies on those, or application cookbook that has dependencies on those library cookbooks, and then include them as recipes in there, right? So you would have, actually, let me see if I could show you like that, right? I would have specific recipes for Nginx, Postgres, Rails, and for example, the Postgres stuff would just be using the Postgres cookbook, and then adding very specific databases for to configure it. Now this is specific for a development stack, so we're not going into a whole lot of things with security issues and things like that. So if you're gonna do a much bigger deployment, you're probably going to end up with a different set of application cookbooks. As far as Berkshire goes, Berkshire itself can take down a set of cookbooks defined from the bookshelf and upload them directly to a chef server, in which case then from there you can do a deployment. Or you can download it into a format, into a chef repository, and then upload it from there. So there's ways to work.
Berkshire connect up to, is Berkshire, if you don't have a chef server or aren't running a chef server, or is it meant to be used in conjunction with the chef server?
Berkshire was written primarily to work with Vagrant, as in both chef client mode and chef solo mode. So it's mainly to manage, it's to say this set of cookbooks goes together, and this is where you pull them out from. And then it has some limited tools for uploading a set onto a chef server, but that's not necessary. What's happening here with Berkshire and Vagrant is that, and first of all, we're using the newest version of Vagrant, which you download as a separate app, and it has its own embedded Ruby and all that. And then you install the Berkshire plugin for Vagrant, which then they work together. But you can use the Berkshire command directly. Berks uploads, whatever, upload where the cookbooks to wherever you need to go. Any other questions? Yeah.
How does Berkshire differ from Chef Librarian?
They're very, very similar, but the emphasis are a little different. I never quite got the good answer on that, other than that Berkshire seems to do a lot better with the idioms work more like bundler than librarian does. So if you know how to write a gem file, the concepts in Berkshire is the same. But it also has the same kind of limitations. You can't define multiple versions of the same cookbooks. And sometimes you kind of need that, sometimes you don't. So, but yeah, there are talks. Opscode recently put out something called Test Kitchen. This is maybe about maybe about a year ago. It allows you to test cookbooks inside virtual machines, and it was originally designed to work with Librarian. And later they started talking about getting into work with bookshelves so people can write it for IBM. So very similar stuff, and I think there's slight differences. I don't actually know how to use Librarian with Vagrant. I just saw that bookshelf is conceptually maybe seems easier to understand coming from a development background. Okay. Any other questions? Cool, I'm free now.